During the last 24 hours, Israel has seen some of the largest anti-government protests in months. Tens of thousands of people gathered in central Jerusalem on Sunday, calling on the government to reach a ceasefire deal and free the dozens of hostages who are still being held in Gaza. They also called for early elections. France 24's Emerald Maxwell filed this report for us.
Nearly 6 months into the war, Israeli protesters have lost patience with their Prime Minister. They're camping out in front of the Knesset for 4 days, after taking to the streets on Sunday in the largest anti-government protest since the start of the conflict.
I'm doing what I've been doing for the last 4 months. I'm asking politely to Mr. Netanyahu to go away.
We cannot imagine him not being replaced because he's driving us to the abyss. If good leaders or a new coalition is not taking over, we are doomed.
After putting up a united front following October 7th, cracks in Israeli society are re-emerging. Benjamin Netanyahu has not delivered on his promises of destroying Hamas and bringing all the hostages home. Some 100 Israelis and the remains of 30 others are believed to still be detained. Many hostages' families had refrained from publicly denouncing the Prime Minister and the attack's aftermath, but now believe time is running out and are calling for a ceasefire.
I'm in favour of a comprehensive deal, not just a humanitarian deal and stop at that. I'm in favour of a deal that will free everyone, a deal in stages. I'm happy for those who were released, yet my heart is broken that her daughter was murdered and her body is still in Gaza, and we're unable to bring her home to be buried in Israel.
Netanyahu is also facing a series of corruption charges which are slowly making their way through the courts. And protesters say his decisions appear to be focused on political survival over the national interest. Unless his government falls apart sooner, Netanyahu won't face elections until spring of 2026.
Well, let's get some more analysis. We can speak now to Arik Rudnitzky, who is project manager at the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University, also a research fellow at the Israel Democracy Institute in Jerusalem. Dr. Rudnitzky, just to quote one person in that report, "We are doomed," he said, referring there to the leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu. How widely held is that kind of opinion?
Well, I think that the last 2 weeks actually witnessed two new developments that took place that are not necessarily connected to one another, but they both have a profound impact on the political stability and also on the public mood in Israel. The one is the failure last month of the talks or the indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas in Qatar, and the other is the internal political crisis of the government of Netanyahu as a result of the failure or the ruling of the Supreme Court in Israel to recruit ultra-Orthodox religious young men. Now, the first development actually it made many dozens of thousands of people to go to the streets in protesting that actually Israel did not make did not exhaust all its efforts to fulfill and complete a deal with Hamas. And the price, I think that the price is on the table, but the problem is that Hamas also demands that a complete ceasefire and end of war. And but also within the protest movement itself, we can hear different voices. Now, for instance, we hear a voice that actually represents the interests or the pure interest of the families of the hostages themselves, that say that we should not put the politics into this game. Our cause is humanitarian. We want the consensus in the Israeli public. And actually, they oppose those who actually have some political motives. They're calling upon early elections that should take place in the next couple of months. So I think that there are many voices, but no one can rule out that the amount of rage among the Israeli public at large. I think that the pictures, what we see on the screen right now, actually tells a true story.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Netanyahu faces a litany of corruption charges, and some cynics say that it's not in his interest to end the war because when the music stops, he'll go to prison. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm aware of such cynics' analysis. Actually, I don't tend to accept such statements. Of course, they are quite cynic, and I don't believe that actually Netanyahu has an interest to prolong the war. No prime minister in Israel has an interest to prolong the war. The war is complicated, and I think that this complex is also evident in the Israeli public. So this is one thing. Another thing is that the decision is not in the hands of Netanyahu alone. With all due respect, Netanyahu is the prime minister, but he has a cabinet, he has a minister, we have a wide cabinet today, including also Benny Gantz and Eisenkot. So there are many opinions, and the decision is not in the decision making is not only in the hands of the prime minister. Also, the divisions are evident and reflected in the public opinion. Now, what we see according to recent public opinion polls by the Israel Democracy Institute, we see, for instance, that 49% in the recent poll conducted 2 weeks ago said that Israel should act according to its own interest, while 43% say that, well, Israel should take into consideration the pressure or the interest, mutual interest with the US. So the picture is complicated. On another poll, we heard that some 70% of the general Israeli public support or understand that the need for a military campaign in Rafah. So I think that the picture is complex, but the growing rage against the conduct of the government is quite evident.
Yeah, and I just want to ask you one last question. I mean, how worried are the average people in Israel about the state of relations between Israel and Washington? Because it appears that things have got pretty antagonistic between Benjamin Netanyahu and the President Joe Biden and his regime. What do people there say about that?
I think this is one of the most complicated issues. Of course, you will hear various opinions here and there. It depends on the political orientation. For instance, voters who voted for the coalition, support for the coalition from the right-wing supporters actually justifies, they tend to justify Israel's stance and the attitude that Israel should actually promote its own interest, and the interest with the US actually comes on second place. But on the other hand, we see large proportion in the public, more than 40%, according to the recent poll by the Israel Democracy Institute, are worried to some extent or to a large extent from the erosion of Israel's position on the international level. So the picture is complex. Take all this into consideration with the calls upon to early elections, and I think that many things are going to be put on the table if or should early elections should be called here in Israel.
Okay, we're going to have to see if we're out of time. Dr. Arik Rudnitzky, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us on France 24.